Ben, Starmer started his premiership with sky-high expectations, a historic Labour majority, a strong mandate. But just a year later, his personal ratings have absolutely nosedived. I think the latest from YouGov shows 67% of people have an unfavourable opinion of him. What happened?
Where to begin? He came into high office with, there were expectations for the Labour government, but there weren't that high expectations for him. He entered number 10 with only around about 39% of us feeling favourable about him,
Right.
and he entered number 10 with about 35% of us with an unfavourable view about him. He entered with, net positive numbers for him, but my goodness me, they were a rarity for him in the run-up to that election day. So he came, relatively speaking, he's a pretty unpopular premier from the outset, but he's already fallen pretty far. If you take all the polls, if you go to Britain Elects, it's negativity 57%, positivity 21%. When you compare that to other world leaders, which I think is what we're going to get onto, he is polling worse than the US President Donald Trump, who, unlike Keir Starmer, has a base. Trump has a base, Starmer does not. So hollow was the enthusiasm for that Labour government, that Labour majority, that really it is so quick, so easy for people to just move away. Trump has enthusiastic supporters. Trump has a core vote. Starmer doesn't. But then again, neither did Sunak or Truss or Johnson or Theresa May. All of these premiers of the past 5 to 10 years, when Trump was in office, had lower approval ratings than he. I would comment that Starmer's fall from grace is one of the fastest we've seen of a prime minister just 1 year into high office. But right now, he's amongst the rest. He's just one of the usuals, one of the others, one of the also-rans, one of the unpopular lot, which is the norm now, isn't it?
Right. Okay. I'm so glad that you put it into that context, because I was going to ask how he compares to, previous prime ministers that we've had in recent years. Basically, as a prime minister these days in the UK, you can't expect to have favourable ratings.
Yeah, so I've got net favourable ratings for prime ministers by days in office, and Starmer's what? It's coming up to day 400, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've only got the data to 385. Starmer's at minus 36. Okay, at this point in Sunak's reign, Sunak was at minus 34. Liz Truss, by the way, left Downing Street at minus 37. So for Starmer to be at the same level as Liz Truss, even though it's more been a slow burn with Sir Keir, is not a good look. At this point in Boris Johnson's premiership, Johnson was at minus 2. That COVID bounce was just dying away. Theresa May, who had absolutely ruined the 27 general election for herself, was only just now entering net negativity. She was on minus 9. David Cameron was on minus 4. And Gordon Brown, bless him, he was on minus 49 at this point in his premiership. This was the financial crisis taking hold. But immediately after that, he went from minus 49 to minus 33. So minus 29, actually, because of his response. Hashtag saved the world. But Tony Blair, meanwhile, at this point in Starmer's premiership, was at plus 38.
Right. Okay. Wow. I mean, these are some sobering numbers. I think one of the polling results that's got a lot of attention lately that I mentioned at the top of the podcast was this fact that Starmer is less popular than Trump among British voters. Trump's never been particularly popular among British voters. I mean, what does that tell us?
It depends on the pollster you look at. So YouGov has had lower numbers for Starmer. Just to reiterate, if you look at all pollsters, Starmer's on, has only a positivity of 21%. And to tell you the truth, yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if more voters, just a slim number of voters, have a slim number have a more positive view of Donald Trump. But that speaks to the state of Britain right now.
Right.
Reform is on 30-something% of the vote if an election was held now. A lot of those, I would say about 60% of Reform voters do like Donald Trump. Then add in a few Tories, and yeah, actually, probably more people like Trump in this country today how maybe temporarily than they do Keir Starmer. It speaks to Starmer's fall from grace. It speaks to the collapse in enthusiasm for the Labour brand. Here's an eye-opening statistic. We like to think of Wales as the bedrock of Labourism.
Yeah.
It's had a continuous Labour government since 1999 there, or 97 if you include New Labour, in Westminster. Right now, the Labour brand in Wales is polling, lower in Wales than it is in England. Labour is less popular in Wales than in England. Something's gone wrong in bedrock Labourism there. So what we're seeing right now is the Labour base, this house of cards, whatever analogy you can think up, it's fallen through the floor. And I've been a New Statesman journalist for 5 years, and every year I've probably said something like, "This is not normal." Welcome to 2025, and this is not normal.
Yeah, and let's have a quick look at how that fall from grace might have happened. The tone was set quite early on, wasn't it, during the first 100 days with the winter fuel policy, keeping the 2-child benefit cap, tax changes, drawing backlash from farmers. I think there was a sense building, even in those early days, of whose side is Labour on? What is a Labour government supposed to be for? Are they actually the party who is supposed to be, cutting benefits, attacking pensioners, undermining farmers? I think there was a brand problem, wasn't it, with the initial policies that it brought in?
Yeah. The first 100 days are often the days when voters pay attention the most. Like I've said this many times before, the average voter spends only a few minutes worth of attention on politics or the news every week. And when you've got a new government, you've got the shiny factor. People want to project onto the Labour government what it could be, what it should be. And so people have a heightened level of awareness of what it is. And so for More in Common polling to find that the most noticed success, in inverted commas, from this Labour government has been the winter fuel payments, not the pay rises for junior doctors, not any of the stuff that Labour would want to dress
breakfast
up
clubs,
as good. Breakfast clubs, all the stuff. There are some
workers' rights policies.
Yeah, all these positive things that are happening that voters are just not noticing, because the defining story was we are taking winter fuel payments away, not just from the richest pensioners, but the middling pensioners and even some lower earning pensioners as well. What a brand set that is. And here's the thing with pensioners, everyone knows one. Everyone knows one, so everyone's going to have an opinion on it. And then you add that to the welfare changes, which, to be honest with you, 1 in 3 to maybe even 4 in 10. I should use standardize the numbers there. 1 in 3 to 4 in 10 voters actually quite liked the welfare changes proposed by Liz Kendall, but it depressed the Labour base. It cost Labour the Runcorn by-election and a great many council seats. It's not a good start. It shows what priorities are these. They're not the British people's. They want cost of living relief, and voters aren't feeling that right now.
And how much do U-turns matter? Because obviously they U-turned on removing that winter fuel allowance from all of those pensioners that you mentioned. They U-turned on the sort of bulk of their welfare changes in terms of personal independence payments, obviously hoping that would, result in a little bounce in their popularity, quell some of the quell some of the opposition within their own party, but also do something for their ratings. How much of the U-turns actually helped in terms of how they're seen by the public?
Yes, so the announcements are noticed by most of us, or rather, the highest number, and the U-turns are noticed by very, very few of the number. I'll tell you now, you ask any Labour activist, any Labour councillor in the country, and if they go door knocking, and they will tell you that winter fuel payments, the cuts of, still comes up, still features highly. It's one of the main reasons why Labour's been doing so badly, because it's like, why are you taking money away from my grandma? She has no money. What are you doing? It doesn't make sense. So I think U-turns, whilst you should never be needing to make U-turns, because the public won't notice it as much as the announcement, and the public will be very unwilling to forgive you because they think that you are already an unstable ship. You were elected, Labour came in on the notion of change, on the notion of marking a break with the past 14 years. And then now, for the vast majority of voters, I think it's going on 7 in 10 of us, to say, I don't see any difference to the last lot. These U-turns only illustrate, exemplify that, I think. It's more of the same, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, well, stay with us and we'll be back after a short break. Remember, all our podcasts are available ad-free on the NS app. The links to the download are in the show notes. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to the New Statesman podcast with me, Anoosh Chakelian, and my colleague, Ben Walker. So there was a large coalition of voters which contributed to the election of Labour last year. Which of these groups has he now alienated the most, or risks alienating the most?
Oh God, which one the most? All of them. He does. Well, actually, tell a lie. More in Common I keep More in Common have become my favourite pollster now. They've done something called 7 segments. Every pollster, every think tank likes to splice and slice every the UK into multiple components. The most debased one was Left Behind Britain, Red Wall Britain, Blue Wall Britain. Those days, I think, thankfully, are long gone. And then we got these 7 segments, which actually I find a little bit more interesting. And you've got disgruntled dissenters, you've got progressive activists, you've got establishment liberals, and a whole host of others. And Starmer's Labour only has a lead amongst established liberals, which sounds interesting. It's the centre, it's the core, it's those semi-detached, mortgage-paying, quite affluent homeowners. Problem is, they're only 9% of the country. It's interesting stuff, but it tells you really that the kind of people that I think are quite common in journalism are very uncommon outside in the rest of the world, really. So who has he alienated the most? He's alienated the base. But what is the base? Well, you've got the progressive activists, 3 in 10 of which now say they'll vote Green. That was already happening, by the way, in the 2024 general election. Don't forget that amongst Labour-held seats in 2024, July 24, the Labour vote went down. It was starting to fall across the board on the Wirral, near where I am, in London as well, particularly with increased support for the Greens. And where else are they alienating now? They're alienating, I suppose, there was always a socially conservative element to the Labour vote last year. A little bit more than I think people like to admit. A lot of those now have become so irate with Labour. They're either moving to reform wholesale, so 1 in 10 Labour voters have since gone to reform, or a lot of them are staying at home because they might be socially conservative, but they're not reform levels of socially conservative. Right. Never forget that this country, by and large, has been pretty immigration critical for the last 3, 4, 5 decades. The average voter is far removed from, I think, the average commentator or whoever, really. They are more socially conservative. So Starmer's irritated those. The Liberals, the established Liberals, seems like he's just about got them on, but they are, they're new Labour types, aren't they? So he's got that, but there's not a lot of them, is there?
It's interesting what you say about those progressive activist kind of voters. They were already, dripping away from Labour last year. What does it mean for Labour that we now have the prospect of a new left party, as well as, a potential change in the sort of brand of the Greens if Zach Polanski wins that leadership contest?
Yeah. The name recognition for Polanski, well, of course, it's a leadership election. We don't know what it will be in a few months or few years' time. It's all a bit of an unknown, but I think the polls have already moved I wouldn't say as much as they could, but they've already moved quite sizably. So where is Labour right now? Labour are on about 20-something%, 20 to 25%, depending on which pollster you look at. The Greens are on about 8 to 10%. Reform are on 30+%. if a New Left Party just set up now, it would get between 5 and 10%. Other people think it'll get more, but based on what I've been able to see, it will get between 5 and 10% to start with. And most of their share would come from the Greens. The Greens are already the receptacle for those disgruntled progressive activist type voters. Progressive activists, by the way, make up about 1 in 10 of the UK population. Okay, so they're not nothing, but they're not, the be all and end all. Already they have moved, a hefty chunk of them have moved to the Greens. If a New Left Party were to come about, if the Greens were to pick up some steam with Polanski, if they do pick up some steam, by the way, you can't bank on that, because the current appeal of the Greens does net them some support in more Tory areas. Will that die with Polanski? I don't know yet. I don't know. But the New Left Party would end up between 5 and 10%. Hefty chunk of that, almost half of that, would come from the Greens. The Greens would lose a bit.
Right.
Labour would lose a little bit, but not as much as the Greens. Something to bear that in mind. Okay, so the biggest loser from this New Left Party wouldn't necessarily be Labour; it would be the Greens.
Right, that's really interesting. And you wrote a great piece this week that readers can go and have a look at on the New Statesman website about the impact of what's happening in Gaza on Labour's popularity. And the point that you make, which I think is a really important one, is it's not just, areas with high Muslim populations that are sort of calling for, Palestinian statehood and more robust action on Gaza from the government. It's actually other places that you might not necessarily expect.
Yes, so it's not just Muslim-heavy areas. It's not just inner cities. It's also, parts of home counties, England. It's also pretty much those established liberals. Progressive activists plus established liberals makes 1/3 of the country. And right now, 45% of us say they want to recognise a Palestinian state. Where that support comes from, yes, it's not just Muslim-heavy areas. It's in Chester, where I'm from. It's in North Norfolk. It's in Powys, in Wales. It's in the central belt of Scotland. There is a great deal of support for recognising Palestine, but there is also a lot of people who are pretty unbothered by it all. There is a strand of society out there that is very much of the view that if it's not in my backyard, then it's not my problem, and I'm not interested in it. Which is why, in places like Boston and Skegness, you've got 45% who aren't bothered. In Clacton, Nigel Farage's seat, you've got, again, 45% who aren't bothered whether we recognise it at all. And that speaks to, there's a kind of a country that's switched on to what's happening in Israel-Palestine. There's a kind of and there's also a country that is absolutely not, and it does trend along reform and progressive lines. Yeah,
Right.
But it's not just Asian voters. It's not just Muslim voters. There's growing sympathy. How can there not be?
And as ever, sort of it creates, this dilemma for Labour of whether it should tack more to the right or try and win back the trust of those voters that some would say it's been taken for granted. Those progressive activist or liberal voters in cities and places perhaps that they haven't been so focused on in recent years.
Yeah, I would say so. You do have to wonder, though, if you tack too progressive, do you irritate the reformers? There's always that assumption amongst Labour strategists that if you go one side, you'll annoy the other. But the problem is, just to reiterate, these guys aren't that bothered about Palestine. These guys aren't, out and out against it. The most opposed, the greatest opposition to recognising Palestine is only about 1/5 of us, and they're spread across the country. They're not concentrated necessarily in one area. It's what we are right now as a country is that most of us want to recognise a Palestinian state. A small percentage of us don't, and the rest of us, which is around about 40% as well, aren't bothered. That is the right-wing vote, the unbothered element, okay? Think about them, not the smaller, more opposed, more radical extreme.
Right, it's interesting. Okay. And lastly, Ben, how bad are things really for Starmer? I mean, can he turn things around or by the next election, or is it looking increasingly difficult?
It's bad. It is bad without question. So, look, Starmer's fall from grace in personal ratings is one of the is on the quicker end of the spectrum. The Labour brand has fallen through the floor, particularly in Wales, particularly in Scotland. Labour's lost, greater vote share in Scotland than it has across England, and that is in spite, of course, of we did have a by-election a few months ago for the Scottish Parliament that Labour gained from the SNP. It's because reform took quite a number of SNP votes. The Labour brand as well on the most fundamental issue of the hour, of every hour, is the economy. And that has also collapsed as well. So Labour came into office 10, 15 points ahead on the economy. They're now at net zero over the Conservatives. And that speaks to Labour's fall from grace there. But it also speaks to the Tories' complete impotence on the issue. The Tories have been stock still.
Right.
So it's really Labour only falling.
Yeah.
Again, these are not normal times. The last time a government fell as fast as Labour did was 1992, Black Wednesday. John Major's Tories. That's how bad it is for Labour, except the problem is, thankfully for Labour, they don't have as organised an opposition. Their opposition is splintered. It's all over. Can Labour come back? I think Labour can come back. But I think Keir Starmer, with his ratings as bad as they are, and for as many voters to have made their mind up about him as have, I don't think there's a way back for the Prime Minister.
Wow.
I think really Labour needs to mark a significant break with what they came in on change. They haven't delivered change. Voters aren't feeling the change. They don't see the change. So they're associating Starmer with the politics of yesteryear. You now need a new guy or gal to mark real change. And so I think really for Starmer, I don't think he will be facing the electors at the next election. I think,
Wow.
If Labour was interested in doing regicide in the way the Tories do, they would have the common sense to do so. But I don't think Labour does that, do they?